Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if the language you speak actually shapes how you see relationships, or if a super smart computer can understand these cultural differences as well as we do? Well, this new study dives right into that fascinating question. Imagine you are meeting someone from a completely different country. How do you know how to act? What is considered polite, friendly, or even respectful can change a lot from place to place. This is what psychologists call relationship knowledge. The unspoken rules and expectations we have about different kinds of connections, like with family, friends, or co-workers. Because we learn these rules by growing up in a specific culture, it is a super important way to understand how culture shapes our minds. Now, imagine artificial intelligence like those chatbots you might be talking to. They're interacting with people all over the world, giving advice, role-playing, and helping with all sorts of social stuff. But do they really get these cultural differences? Or do they just give us a generic one-size-fits-all answer? That is the big puzzle this research team wanted to solve. They wondered if these big language models, or LLMs, could capture the amazing variety of how people understand relationships across different parts of the world. So what did they do? They use a really cool tool called the FAVEE framework. Think of it like a giant questionnaire that breaks down 159 different types of relationships from parent-child to boss-employee and scores them on 33 different features, like how intimate or formal they are. They got ratings from over 20,000 people in 19 different countries. This gives them a huge picture of how humans see these relationships globally and how it varies from place to place. Then they tested 4 of the most popular big language models against this human data. They basically asked the LLMs to rate these relationships in these different countries too. What they found was pretty interesting. At the big picture level, the LLMs were surprisingly good. They closely matched the human ratings when you looked at everything together, and they even reproduced the general shape of how relationships are organized across different features. It seemed like the AI understood the basic recipe for relationships. This alignment was super strong. For example, when they looked at all the ratings put together, the models had very high correlations with human ratings. This means that if you average everything out, the AI's understanding of relationships looked a lot like ours. They also found that the LLMs reproduced the main categories or components of relationship knowledge, like formality, activeness, valence, exchange, and equality. These are like the main ingredients that make up a relationship's meaning. Even when they looked at individual relationships, the LLM's descriptions were pretty close to what humans reported for most types of relationships. So on the surface, it looked like LLMs were pretty good at understanding relationships, at least within a general sense. But here is where the story gets more complicated. While the LLMs were good at capturing the universal aspects of relationship knowledge, the things that are generally true across most people, they really struggled with the cultural differences. Think of it like this. They could tell you what a friend generally is, but they couldn't easily tell you how the idea of friendship might subtly or even significantly differ between, say, Japan and Brazil. When the researchers looked at how the different countries clustered together based on their relationship knowledge, the human data showed distinct groups of countries, each with its own unique profile. But the LLM data, it showed all the countries packed much closer together. They called this compression. The LLMs were squishing down the differences between cultures, pulling them closer to some kind of average. The spaces occupied by the LLM regions were only about 9 to 10% of the human cultural space. That's a huge difference. They were losing the unique flavor of each culture. They also looked at specific cultural patterns. For example, they found that in human data, the relationship with neighbors tended to become more formal as a society became more modernized. This makes sense as places become more industrialized, and people might interact less intimately with those nearby. Those relationships might become more formal. But the LLMs, they showed a much weaker version of this pattern, or even no pattern at all for one of the models. They were less sensitive to this theoretically meaningful cross-cultural pattern, and in some cases it was even stranger. When they looked at familial relationships, humans in China rated them as less equal compared to the United States. This is a documented cultural difference. But the LLMs actually reversed this. They rated familial relationships in China as more equal than in the United States. Imagine trying to understand family dynamics and getting it completely backward, because the AI didn't quite grasp the cultural nuances. That is a potential problem. So why is this happening? The researchers explored what factors were driving the differences in the LLM's understanding of cultures compared to humans. They found that when a region's human relationship knowledge was already close to the overall average, what they call culturally average regions, the LLMs were much better at reproducing it. But for regions with more unique, distinctive cultural profiles, The LLMs performed worse. This suggests the LLMs are really good at capturing the average human experience, but they struggle with the specialized knowledge of less common cultural groups. Furthermore, they discovered that human cultural variation is organized by things like religion and modernization. These are deep societal factors that shape how we relate to each other. But for the LLMs, their cultural variations were organized much more by language similarity and by broader, more abstract cultural frameworks like Hofstede's cultural dimensions. This suggests that LLMs might be using language as a kind of shortcut for cultural understanding, rather than truly grasping the deeper socio-ecological factors like religion or historical context that shape human relationships. When they looked at the similarity between different countries in the LLM's representations, they saw a clearer clustering based on shared languages. This contrasts with the human data, where language was less of a dominant factor in grouping cultures compared to other societal influences. It is like the LLMs are saying, if you speak the same language, you must be similar culturally, which isn't always the case. So, what is the big takeaway here? LLMs are incredible at picking up on the broad universal patterns of human social knowledge. They can tell us a lot about the shared architecture of our relationships. However, they seem to flatten out and compress the vibrant, unique variations that make each culture's understanding of relationships distinct. They're not bad at understanding relationships, but they have a tendency to represent what is shared rather than what is distinctive across cultures. This is a crucial distinction. Cultural variation isn't just random noise, it is often the very thing we want to understand. If AI models systematically reduce this variation, they might give us a misleading picture of human psychology, making everything seem more uniform than it really is. What does this mean for us and for researchers? For cross-cultural psychology, it means we need to be cautious. If we want to understand the nuances of cultural differences, how minority groups express themselves, or the specific reasons behind those differences, LLMs might not be the best substitute for human participants. They can be useful for generating hypotheses or understanding general human tendencies, but they don't fully capture the rich tapestry of culturally specific meanings. It is important to remember that this research is a snapshot in time. As LLMs get even more advanced, with different training data and methods, they might get better at capturing these cultural nuances. Also, this study looked at 19 regions, which is a lot, but the world is vast, and there is still so much cultural diversity to explore. Future research could look at more diverse prompts, like using interactive conversations instead of just structured questions, and expand the range of cultures studied. Ultimately, this study highlights a key challenge in the age of AI. How do we ensure that these powerful tools can represent not just the average human experience, but the incredible diversity of human experience across cultures? It is a step towards understanding that AI's social intelligence might be different from ours, built on text patterns rather than lived socio-ecological experiences. So, what do you think? Does this change how you view AI's understanding of the world? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next dive into the fascinating world of science. Thanks for watching.